everybody. It's an honor, a privilege for me to welcome you to worship today. So glad that you are with us. We this year are trying to go back to our creation calling and command when God says to us that we are to be fruitful. And Jesus picks up on this and he says that he's chosen us, he's appointed us in order to bear fruit. And then when we get to the book of Galatians, Paul tells us what that fruit looks like. It has these 9 qualities: love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness, gentleness and self-control. How are you doing on at least memorizing the 9? Get to work. This is what we're doing all year. And so month by month, we're looking at a different aspect of the character of bearing fruit that God has created us to do. And so this month, we're talking about love. And we discover in the book of Proverbs that this is kind of our proverb of the month, that hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers over all wrongs. Last week, we talked about a love that is obedient. This doesn't mean a love that's compliant. We're talking about a love that bears deep commitments. We learned how love is both a command, in other words, it's something that you do, and it's something that's in your heart, all of your soul, all of your strength. That love is the kind of thing that is both a commitment to action and a commitment to a spirit and a motive in which you were doing that action. And we did that by looking at the foundational text of Deuteronomy, the hero Israel, and loving God with every aspect of our lives. And today we're going to talk about a love that remains, a love that stays, a love that sticks, a love that holds fast. And we're going to do that by understanding one particular word in the Old Testament that is super important. It's one of the most theologically rich and important words. It's the word hesed, and it means a steadfast love, it means a loyal love, it means an unfailing and unflinching kind of love. It's sometimes translated in, particularly like an NIV, with sometimes a loving kindness, or sometimes they just use the shorthand kindness. But 247 times in the Old Testament, this word repeats. And it does so 3 times in the short book that we're going to look at this morning, the book of Ruth. And so as we discover this kind of love, it begins by just this little line here at the top that says, "In the days when the judges ruled." And that's not just like a historical marker to say this is when the story takes place. That is like a warning label telling you that something is wrong. For you see, the Judges was the period of time that was the bloodiest in Israel's history. The Judges was the period of time with the greatest amount of conflict. The Judges was the period of time where they had the greatest political swings from one direction to the next. I know this might be hard for you to imagine, but there was a period where people were tribal, that they didn't stick together. They were all bifurcated into their little groups. And according to the book of Judges, there was one thing that repeated through this period, that everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine a barbaric period of time where people only did the way that they saw it? And yet in the middle of this violent, bloody, chaotic period, there's a story, a true story, a love story. And it goes like this. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and so a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and his 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. And they went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there for about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died. And Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. 5 verses pregnant with meaning, exploding with all kinds of different emotions. And because you did not respond to any of it, let's try it again and see if I can elicit a response. In the politically chaotic, violent periods when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. And so a man from Bethlehem, which means the house of bread. So wait a minute, there's a famine in the house of bread. Together with his wife and his 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab, a neighboring country. Moab in Hebrew literally means, who's your daddy? That's the literal translation. Because these people were half-breeds. They were traitors. They were people of suspect lineage and genealogy. Hold on a second. There's a famine, and this family from Bethlehem bails to Moab? And the man's name, get this, was Elimelech. He goes to Moab even though his name means, my God is king. That wasn't the God down in Moab, according to them. And his wife's name was Naomi, which means pleasant. And the names of the 2 sons are Mahlon and Chilion. We'll get to them. They were Ephrathites. That's from the land of Ephraim. Do you know what Ephraim means in Hebrew? It means fruitful. This is the breadbasket of Israel. This is where the harvest grows. This is where the orchards of plants are. It is the most visible, intangible sign of that original creation mandate to cultivate. And they went to Moab, and they lived there. Elimelech, the guy whose name means my God is king, he dies. Naomi's left not just with a broken heart, but with 2 sons. With 2 sons, she can still be provided for. But these 2 sons married Moabite, suspect women. One of them named Orpah, not to be confused with Oprah, but that is exactly how Oprah got her name. Did you know that fun fact? That it's just a misspelling of Orpah? And the other is Ruth, and they lived there about 10 years. Both Mahlon and Chilion die. And so Naomi is no longer pleasant. She has no husband. She has no sons. This is not just the normal grief of, I miss the people I love or the people that I gave life to. This is beyond that. If you were a woman in the ancient world, you had no way to provide for yourself without the care and protection of a husband or a son. You had no ability economically to be independent, separate from a man in that agrarian society. And so Naomi finds herself in the most precarious of situations. Rich, I thought you told me this was a love story. It is a love story. Bear with me. But it's not an ordinary kind of love. It is a love that remains. 3 times the word hesed appears in this story. A love that stays when others let go. A love that sees what others overlook. And a love that finishes when others fall short. The same word repeated each time, one in each of the first 3 chapters of the book of Ruth. Let's first talk about how love stays when others might bail or let go. So I shared with you that Naomi has absolutely no ability to care for herself, to be able to provide for herself. And so she goes to her daughters and is like, I'm helpless, I'm hopeless, I can do nothing else for you. You should go back. She says it like this. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you to your mother's home. May the Lord show you hesed, as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." They weep out loud. They grieve. And both of them originally like, no, we want to stay with you. But eventually, Orpah turns her back and goes home. Orpah is the word for the back of your neck in Hebrew. It means either stiff-necked or turning around to show somebody your neck as you walk away. She bails. Ruth says, I'm not going anywhere. I don't care that there's no hope, no future, no life. I'm with you. And she gives one of the most famous speeches in the Old Testament. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. And when Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. Under no circumstances, as beautiful and as poetic as those words are, no matter how common those words are at a wedding, we cannot romanticize what is happening here in the desperation of this particular vow and moment. This was an Old Testament passage that was said at our wedding day. It's beautiful. It's fascinating that the context for that passage is not a vow between a husband and a wife. It's not romantic love. It is a fierce, resilient love between a grieving set of widows. And again, we can't romanticize this even more because what we learn in the whole rest of the first chapter is that Naomi feels like that God has abandoned her. She believes that God has turned his back on her, that God has not been faithful. And she spends the whole rest of the chapter saying, don't call me Naomi anymore, call me Mara, which means bitter. She literally wants people to give her a different nickname. Ruth chooses to pledge her loyalty and her love to a bitter old woman. And she's going to stick with her, no matter how painful it is to be living with somebody with that level of anger and resentment. And so, no, you cannot wear rose-colored glasses and see this love other than that it's gritty and it hangs tight. The first aspect of God's love, God's steadfast love, his hesed that we see in the story is that it stays when others let go. It remains. It holds fast. Then in chapter 2, we're about to see that love also notices or sees what others overlook. So Ruth sticks with Naomi. Naomi finds out after a while that the famine is over in Bethlehem, and she decides that she's got nothing else to lose and that she'll go back, and she's got Ruth in tow. And they show up at Bethlehem, and it's harvest time where you would get a swell of workers because there was plenty of work to go around. And so when they get there, Ruth tells her mother-in-law, look, I got to go get us something to eat. I got to go work. And the text says, as it happened, Ruth found herself in a particular field. That is code language in the Bible for it did not just happen. That is God's quiet providence at work. Because she ends up in a particular field that is owned and managed by a guy by the name of Boaz. And the text says this. Just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. The Lord be with you, he said. The Lord bless you, they answered. Boaz asked the overseer of his harvesters, who dat? And this is not like you strike up the violins, there's this beautiful young woman. There's no hint at this point of romanticism. The way he refers to her in a little bit as daughter. I'll tell you why he notices her, is that almost every single time in the book of Ruth that Ruth's name is mentioned, it's not just saying Ruth, it is Ruth the Moabite. It is Ruth who ain't from here. Ruth who doesn't look like the rest of us. Ruth who is very clearly a foreigner and does not belong here. Pretty obvious, Boaz shows up, he's addressing the harvesters and kind of galvanizing the troops, and he's like, who's that? And yet, out of kindness, out of love, Boaz says, make sure that she's cared for. Make sure she has a place where she can work safely. And at the end of a long work day, Ruth is carrying 30 pounds of grain from one day of work and brings it home to Naomi and drops it on the kitchen table. And Naomi says this, where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you. Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one whose place she had been working. The man of the name I worked with today is Boaz, which in Hebrew means strength. And she said, the Lord bless him. Naomi, who's incredibly bitter, said to her daughter-in-law, he has not stopped showing his hesed to the living and the dead. That man is our close relative. He is one of our guardian redeemers. There was a system in Israel, in the ancient world, to help provide for the widow and the orphan. And that system was set up that on the basis of who is the closest relative, if you've gone through a tragedy like this, that they bore both the right and the responsibility, both for the land, because there was no wealth that was not tied to land, both for the wealth of that family as well as making sure that there was going to be a future for that family, that they had to provide for the fathering and the future of that family. That was the system that was in play. That is known as the guardian redeemer. But as you know, even the best systems sometimes, people don't do what they're supposed to do. Boaz notices the foreigner Ruth, the Moabite. He sees her. And what we're about to discover, and what you probably know from experience, is that there is no greater pain than feeling like you were not seen, you were not known, you were not heard, that you are invisible. And there is probably nothing bigger and greater in life than being known and heard and seen by God and the people around you. This hesed, this steadfast love in chapter 1 stays when others will turn their back. This hesed, this steadfast love of God sees when other people are just keeping their head down and just doing the work. And this hesed, this love of God that remains, finishes when others fall way short. And so Ruth gleans in the fields. She brings home this amount of grain, and they live off of the love and the kindness of being able to work with Boaz. And this is when Naomi starts to get an idea. She says, Ruth, I'm going to need you to go take a bath. I'm going to need you to put on your best dress. I'm going to need you to put on some of that perfume. And tonight, when it gets dark, tonight, not right away, make sure he's had enough to eat and especially to drink. And then I want you to go to the threshing floor where the celebration is taking place. And Boaz is going to go to sleep. I want you to lie down at his feet. And so Ruth does what Naomi instructs her. And something stirs Boaz in the middle of the night. And he wakes up and his feet are warm. Strangely warmed. And he says, "Who are you?" And she says, "I'm your servant Ruth." And she says, not going to miss this, "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are guardian redeemer of our family." "The Lord bless you, my daughter," he replied. "This hesed is greater than which you shown earlier. You've not run after the younger men, whether they were rich or poor. Now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character." This requires a little bit of backstory. When God's people are saved in the Exodus story, in Exodus 19, it says that they were saved by being carried on eagle's wings. The word for wing in Hebrew is kanaf. When you get to later in the story, God is commanding them that in all of the male garments, have you ever seen this with the Orthodox Jews? They still do this today, that they are to have on the corner of their robes these tassels that are attached to the kanafs. And the reason that they have these kinds of things is because it is mandated, it is commanded that they do this with their clothing for a particular purpose. This is Numbers chapter 15. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, throughout the generations to come, you were to make tassels on the kanafs of your garments, with a blue cord on each tassel. You will have these tassels to look at, and so you will remember all of the words, all the commands, all the covenants of the Lord." And so Ruth goes to Boaz in the middle of the night, and she says, "I want you to put the corner of your robe over me." Don't miss what Boaz said in the previous chapter about this. This is Boaz blessing Ruth, the Moabite foreigner. "May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord for her service to Naomi, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Do you understand the audacity of what Ruth is doing in this moment, when she is saying, "Put the corner of your robe over me, for you are my kinsman redeemer"? She is doing two things. One, she is saying, "I want you to bring me into the covenant of God. I want to be under God's wings as well. I want to be under his saving grace." And she is saying, "And you're just the man to do it." She is proposing to him. This is an audacious engagement. This is incredible that a foreign woman with no standing in a time when women were considered to be property, that she would propose. And do you know what Boaz does? He says, bring your shawl over here. Hold it out. And when she does so, he takes 6 measures of barley, not the most romantic, but very practical of engagement presents. And he puts it in her shawl, and she takes it home, and she goes back to Naomi, and Naomi is sitting at home, hasn't slept a bit, and she's like, "How did it go?" And she takes the 6 measures of barley, and she says, he gave me grain, 6 measures of grain. And Naomi backs up, and she says, "Oh, my daughter, he will not rest. He will not wait. 6 is the number of incompletion. 7 is the number of completion. What he has done is he has said, I have taken the promise all the way here. I will not rest until I finish and complete this. And that's exactly what Boaz does. He goes over to the gate, which was like the town square / also kind of meeting space / courthouse of the day. And he goes to look for a guy who's technically a closer relative than he is. And so in other words, he's the first in line with both the right and the responsibility to take both the land of Elimelech and to take care of the family. And so Boaz comes to him and he said, you might have noticed Ruth the Moabite and Naomi, you're the closest kinsman, would you like Naomi's land? And the guy says, boy, would I like the land. I want that absolutely. And he goes, don't forget, that comes with the responsibility that you need to further the lineage through Ruth. That's when the guy backs up. And he says, I'm not willing to pay that price. But Boaz is willing to pay the price. And because of that, Boaz and Ruth get married. And because of that, they have a child. And because of that, Naomi is holding a grandson in her arms. And she receives this blessing. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age for your daughter-in-law who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons. Ruth the Moabite is better than the perfect family. 7, the number of completion and perfection. Ruth the Moabite is greater than all the wealth in the world, because if you have 7 sons, boy, are they going to be able to create wealth for you. Greater than any stability, greater than anything you could possibly imagine. Ruth is better than that? Yes. Because of her steadfast love. I've been holding out on you. The name Ruth means faithful friend. That is the steadfast love of God. I no longer call you servants, but friends. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down their life for a friend. And Abraham was called a friend of God. That grandson that Naomi is holding in her arms, that grandson grows up. His name is Obed, and he has a son, and his name is Jesse. And that boy, Jesse, he grows up and he has a son, and his name is David, as in King David. And then if you chase the generations from there on, going on forward, generation after generation after generation, you know where you get, don't you? You get to Jesus. Yeah, it's a love story. Because Jesus, as the heir of David, loves when others let go, sees what others overlook, and that Jesus finishes in the cross when everyone else will fall short. There is a love that is greater than bitterness and anger. There is a love that is greater than tragedy and even death. There is a love that is greater than economic insecurity and famine and hunger. There is a love that sees you and knows you. And there is a love that will finish the good work that has begun. Tonight, on your behalf, I'm going to get on a plane and go to Pakistan. I've gotten the question a lot in the last couple of weeks. Why are you going to Pakistan? I hear it's lovely at this time of year. No, because Presbyterian missionaries a long time ago started a school. And there's a fledgling minority foreign Christian community that lives under incredible strain. And we've been associated, connected with, supported that Christian community through that college for decades. And they need to know and be reminded, as do I, that God sees them, that God knows they're here. I'm going to preach next week in Lahore, Pakistan. And what am I going to do in that moment? The only thing I know to do: to be a faithful friend in ministry. And the only message I have is that no matter how much you've lost, no matter how hard it is, there is a guardian redeemer, and his name is Jesus Christ. And you can be covered in his covenant, which is the covenant of his blood. He loves you. That's the love story. And let us pray. God, thank you for remaining with me when others let go. Thank you for seeing me when no one noticed. Thank you for finishing the work in me when there is still so much that is yet to be done. May each person here not just listen about your love. May they be swept up into the greatest love story of them all, that you will be for us faithful friend and blessed Redeemer. And this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.